Good afternoon, everybody. How are we doing? Has everybody had some lunch? No? Yes? But I see excited faces. We're going to have an excellent discussion this early afternoon as we talk about a seat at the table for the most vulnerable and excluded populations. How do we make that happen? And you know, they often say if you don't have a seat at the table, you may be on the menu. This is so important. I'm particularly excited because we have a man who I see as the man in the arena, one of those people on the front lines to speak with us today. Many of you know who he is, and that's why you are here today. He's seated right with us in the front row. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the motto of his organization. They say, wherever there is a fight, so that hungry people may eat, we will be there. World Central Kitchen. This organization was founded in 2010 by Chef José Andrés. Can we give him a round of applause? And it was founded following the devastating earthquake in Haiti. It is a non-profit organization of chefs creating smart solutions to hunger and poverty in the areas of disaster relief, health, jobs and workforce development, and food security. And we're going to hear from him in a short while. But also with us, and to set the scene for us this afternoon, is Alison Evans, Director-General of Evaluation at the World Bank Group. Can we give her a round of applause, please? And this organization does some fantastic work around research and data and ensuring that people are able to identify the right things. She'll tell us more about that. Alison brings more than 25 years of international development experience around policy, research, and evaluation across diverse geopolitical and multicultural environments. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Julie Gichuru. I am a passionate Afro-optimist, and that's why this issue for me is a very important one. We're going to have an interesting afternoon. To set the stage for us, let's give a warm welcome to Alison as she comes up to give us an opening presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Julie. And it's lovely to see so many of you here this early afternoon on a Friday. Some of you may be thinking, this is not the usual kind of event where we hear about evaluation. So I want to try and change your mind a bit today, but on one of the most important topics, I think, facing us all, which is around creating opportunity for those who are often excluded and often vulnerable. So let me start with some of the good news. There we go. The good news that we know worldwide poverty levels have been falling, and they've been falling for some time. The latest World Bank data shows us that those people living in extreme poverty have declined from around 1.8 billion in 1990 to closer to 736 million today. But as this moving map tells us, that same data tell us that there are many countries that are not participating equally in this positive trend. And it also tells us that there are population groups who have a poverty rate today that has not changed for the last decade. And we also know, if we look around the world as it is today, that there are individuals and communities whose livelihoods have been put into reverse by disaster or by conflict. This is where much of the poverty problem lies today. And what we know is that reaching these sometimes excluded minority or vulnerable populations can pose some really unique challenges. Before I go on, let me just say a couple of words about the independent evaluation group here at the World Bank. IEG is responsible for evaluating the work of the World Bank Group and for trying to understand whether the bank group is achieving its intended development outcomes, but also, as importantly, to try and gather lessons and insights from across the bank group portfolio to offer up those lessons to inform future work, how we can do better in the future. And what do those lessons tell us? Well, those lessons tell us, in a nutshell, that many of the things that we need to do to reach these kinds of populations that I've been talking about may require us to think differently, may require us to start working differently in different contexts, but also building more systematically on past successes. The things that have shown to work in the past, we need also to galvanize those and do them more successfully in the future. In IEG, we have a number of evaluations. This clicker's not working so well. We have a number of evaluations that have specifically looked at questions that relate to excluded minority and vulnerable populations, sometimes called the sort of bottom 40%. And those evaluations have generated a number of important insights. And let me just give you a flavor of the sort of general tone of those insights. The first is that we have to, as a development community and as a World Bank group, move beyond expressions of intent and actually focus intentionally on what it is that is limiting the life chances of these individuals and groups. Understanding the barriers and constraints, both at the individual level and also at the system level. The insights also tell us that we need to focus on identifying the pathways that connect people to opportunity. And some of those pathways are direct, for example, through the creation of assets and access to financial services, and others are more indirect, through creating markets and more agile regulation that the poor can benefit from. But as well as identifying those pathways, we need to focus more of our efforts on how change happens. Going beyond relying on trickle down and trickle over to being intentional in the design of what we do and the implementation of what we do to reach these particular population groups. Pass on. One of IEG's evaluations, which was a shared prosperity evaluation, had a very interesting, somewhat innovative approach to understanding the relationship between where World Bank investment projects were taking place around the world and also where the bottom 40% in the world actually live. And this is just an illustration from that evaluation. But what it found overall, by using geospatial data, what it found overall was that there was a good positive association between where World Bank investment projects are located and also where people in the bottom 40% live. But delve deeper, look into that data at a country level and within, and then the picture started to look a little less positive. That there were many countries where that positive relationship simply was not holding. That the location of a number of these World Bank financed projects did not map closely with where people living in extreme poverty were living. And even within countries, and this is an example of a within-country map, there were disconnects between where project resources were flowing and where some of the bottom 40% of people were living. So a key recommendation of that evaluation was that the bank group should much more clearly and systematically monitor the geographical distribution of project beneficiaries and match that with where the extreme poor and the most vulnerable are living. Another insight from our evaluations is that even when investment projects target poor communities, it's not always the case that the priorities that emerge from those communities are the priorities of minority and vulnerable groups. It's often the majority that have the stronger voice. And this reminds us that in many different contexts, vulnerability and exclusion is not necessarily that visible. And we have to pay extra attention to identifying these particular groups. And in some contexts, that could be a young woman, a young mother, a child, or an internally displaced person. It could be an older person, a person from an ethnic or religious minority, a person with a disability. Or it could be persons living in a remote region or a lagging region. And what we know about poverty and exclusion is that often these identities and vulnerabilities intersect. And it's really important that we spend the time to understand how we can work with these communities and individuals better. I'm going to give you 3 short examples from IEG evaluations that give us a little bit of a sense of what the World Bank Group has been able to do and can do to think about connecting people with opportunity, particularly from the bottom 40%. So my first example is from an evaluation we did on early child development. And the example comes from Mafinga in Tanzania, a young mother living in very dire circumstances with a young baby daughter who is seriously undernourished. A World Bank finance project comes to her location offering micronutrients as a form of food supplementation. Really crucial intervention. And that young mother is able to take advantage of that. And over time, her young baby daughter puts on weight, gains energy. Good news. And this is a good story. That's a good outcome. But should the story end there? Because that young baby girl is still at risk in many respects. So the IEG evaluation found that, in fact, in that kind of circumstance, integrating interventions at a number of levels in different ways, coordinating a response, particularly for people who are vulnerable or highly at risk, like this young girl, actually drives much greater impact. Individual interventions have their place, but being able to integrate across them has a much better impact. So, for that young mother, receiving micronutrients could also involve attending a playgroup with her young daughter, receiving some training around stimulating the cognitive development of her young child, increasing the likelihood that this young girl will have an opportunity to learn in school later on. A story of shifting the focus from a chance to survive to a chance to thrive. My next example comes from, it's a rather different one, and is about trying to reach communities in remote and difficult areas. In this case, it was a Power to the Poor project in Lao PDR. And there, the aim of this World Bank Finance project was to build electricity connections to remote, rural, and female-headed households. And what the project essentially did was to offer connections, electricity connections to the grid, while also providing an interest-free credit to these households to both pay for their connection and for their, ultimately for their energy consumption. And what was key about this is that what they were offered was a fairly basic low voltage connection, but also the chance to repay the loan they received at the same level of payment that they were already expending on traditional energy sources, which was for diesel lamps and candles and batteries, which were the usual sources of power. So by setting the repayment level at the same level as expenditure on those things, there was a much higher ability and willingness to pay. And in fact, in the villages where this program took place, 90% of these more vulnerable and disadvantaged households were able to take advantage of this connectivity to the grid and build out from that really strong gains in terms of health, in terms of economic activity, and in terms of schooling. And the key to this was incredibly committed government and also a national utility who really wanted to go the extra mile to connect these households. My last example is probably one very familiar to you, but I think it's really worth saying because actually this is a great example of the need to build on past successes. The World Bank Group has supported self-help groups in India for many, many years. And these have been incredibly effective platforms for engaging and creating opportunities to participate for people who are excluded based on their gender and their caste. And these groups have been able to connect to livelihoods programs and saving and lending programs with an opportunity to build economic improvement, but also crucially, to create opportunities for amplified voice and agency, often amongst low-caste women, who have been increasingly able, through their collective agency, to tackle negative social norms around early marriage and around domestic abuse. Replicating and building out on successes is a really important strategy for creating opportunity for these groups. So let me finally wrap up. If I want you to go away with one message from my opening remarks today, it's that we need to be very intentional about the way we think about creating opportunity for vulnerable and often excluded groups. We, the World Bank Group, we, the international community. We need to focus on what it takes and how to make change happen, and to follow that through, all the way through the implementation cycle. And that applies to us in evaluation also. We need to be asking what, how, why, and for whom. In IEG, we hope to play our part in building lessons of experience that can speak to this agenda. But now, enough of me. Let me wrap up by just saying a quick word about our next speaker. Somebody who has vulnerable populations in mind all of the time, who has also built a really impressive infrastructure to help and try and connect and create opportunity for these vulnerable groups. So from evaluator to practitioner, let me hand the stage over to Chef José Andrés from the World Central Kitchen.
Hello, hello. They gave me this one. It's okay? It works? Oh, yeah, it does work. Hello, people of the World Bank. So happy to be here. You really know the economy is doing well when finally they began inviting chefs like me to speak to you. Yes, I know some of my restaurants, they have difficulty reservations and speak to me after, so I guess it's the only reason you invite me. But listen, it's kind of funny because I'm a guy that left school when I was very much 14, 15. And for me, learning is being used by being surrounded by people that always knew more than me and just try to suck it in and trying to do something with it. Very much, I'm a chef, I'm a cook that I cook for the few, but don't tell me why. Since my arrival to DC, I've always super interested in cooking for the many. And Washington for me was important for many reasons. Not only I met my wife, but I met this guy called Robert Egger, the other love in my life. And Robert is a guy that created DC Central Kitchen. If you are not aware of it, this organization not too far from here. We feed between 8,000 and 10,000 men and women a day. In the process, we take homeless out of the streets. We train them to be cooks. And then restaurants like mine can hire them. It's a brilliant NGO. It's more than an NGO. It's really a business organization kind of under a cover-up of an NGO. So with him, I learned many things. One of the things I learned from him is, and listen to this phrase, that seems that charity is about the redemption of the giver, when charity should be about the liberation of the receiver. Do you agree with me? You agree with him? That's what we are here, and that's what the World Bank is meant to be. And that's the reason that all of you want to be here, to make sure that we are able to liberate every single man and woman out there that need us to perform and to succeed. And more important, help them succeed. So this is very much a little quick story of World Central Kitchen. We are one more NGO. Why we did it? Because we felt was nothing like World Central Kitchen. We only have one mission. We show up in emergencies and we feed the hungry. It's very simple. Everybody understands it. Guess what? It's millions of cooks like me around the world willing to join the army. The only thing we had to do is create a platform with a very simple message. If people are hungry, let's feed them in emergencies. And my problem now is when I tell this to my teams, they go and they began doing it. And it's like, wow, it works. Imagine if to everyone in the World Bank, they will tell you, do whatever you want tomorrow, but eradicate poverty. We give you 24 hours. Wow. You're free to do whatever dream you have. You may fail in many projects, but you'll succeed in many others. Sometimes it's what we did at World Central Kitchen. Began being with a very clear mission and start moving. We show up in Haiti a few weeks after the earthquake, and I did what I know. Began cooking in partnership with some local Spanish NGO in some of the different camps they were managing. I began bringing with me solar cook stoves. I'm a big fan of those. Even I'll tell you how we are not going to be feeding the planet only using solar. But nonetheless, I began using what is clean cook stoves, anything that was not using charcoal, but feeding people in the process. We began taking care of children. If we don't start really investing in children today, it's very hard to be thinking about the future tomorrow. And we began not only doing the post-earthquake feeding mission, we saw that we were not going to leave Haiti anytime soon. So almost 10 years later, still we are there. And we started doing what this event, this spring meeting is all about, creating opportunity for vulnerable and often excluded populations. We didn't only work in Port-au-Prince, we began going far away. This is a beautiful place in Palmis-Tampé, near a little town called Fomberet, near the border with Dominican Republic. If you've never been there, I don't know what you are waiting for. Actually, these spring meetings maybe should be happening in places like this, because it's almost where immediately we can put into action the things we're dreaming in this type of meetings. But here, what you see there is one of the only 3 buildings in an entire community of more than 10,000 people. This was a dining room that became the social gathering of the community next to a school. Children that were not coming in quantities to the school, in the moment we began giving them a plate of food, all of a sudden children were showing up out of nowhere. In the process, they were receiving proper education. In the process, they were receiving proper nutrition. We did things that we tried, that we dreamed. What if we produce a percentage of the vegetables and fruits we give them? We did a farm. We fell because there was not enough water. We keep trying. We keep digging for water. We try to bring water. Sometimes we try to plant the farm, but it's not working 100% as we dream it. You know, sometimes it's good that NGOs or big organizations, we recognize when we fail. Winston Churchill said it best. that success is going from failure to failure without losing enthusiasm. I think it's okay to be sharing when you fail, and you share it openly so others can be learning from your failures, and you can keep trying to try new ways to achieve success. And in the process, everybody was eating in our places with charcoal. But in the process, we thought bigger. What if in the process of feeding people, we try also not only to feed the hungry, but solve a second problem with this cooking with charcoal? We began partnering with local for-profit organizations like Switch, and we began bringing gas to schools, moving away from charcoal and putting gas into many schools around Port-au-Prince and other areas. We impacted more than 120 schools that to this day, they still all are cooking with gas. In the process of helping them after an emergency, we began being part of the community and trying to be active and successful in other areas. And here is what we have. Kitchens that are fully gas. The women don't have to wake up so early in the morning. They don't get burned. They don't inhale the smoke. Their children are healthy because they don't cook with them in the hands and they inhale. They don't cut trees anymore. Deforestation, we hope and we dream that one day will stop. Young girls don't go to the forest to pick up wood when they are too poor to buy charcoal. All of a sudden, when the rain comes, doesn't take the topsoil when the water slides down the mountains, taking away the fertile soil that then doesn't give possibilities to a new good crop. That's the many, many amazing things that the clean cooking. But then we did more than that. We wanted to be part of Haiti. We've been, again, 9 years there. We opened in an orphanage, one of our favorite places. It's more than an orphanage. It's used a home for children that they will never leave because for different health reasons. And they needed bread. We did a bakery, not only to feed the children, but we are with the mentality of the for-profit. We create a bakery that we try to start selling bread. So in the process, we could make some money to keep the orphanage running. We opened a restaurant to achieve two things. They had a little fish production facility. The children had protein. But what if we made another social business that could keep making money and also bring some stability to an area that was so-so? Amazing how a restaurant sometimes can bring stability, not only in Washington, D.C., but in very poor parts of the world, in this case, outside Port-au-Prince. We created a school for young girls so they could come out of the streets, stop using charcoal, and hope that the tourism in Haiti that one day I think is going to be forever increasing, we will start training the future labor force of every hotel and restaurant. This is the kinds we did in the last 9 years. Then, this is the type of thing we do. When the hurricane happened, Maria, Puerto Rico, over 2 years ago, we responded there. Nate, who is our executive director and best friend now, he came with me back then. He was not in Central Kitchen actively. And guess what happened? We went for a week, I told my wife. The problem was so big that 3 months later, we were still there. The entire island was hungry. The entire island was without electricity. The entire island was without water. At the end, remember what I told you at the beginning? We only had one mission. Let's feed the hungry. And we began opening kitchens. We went from 1 kitchen to 26 kitchens. At one moment, 18th, functioning at the same time. We went from 20 friends the first day to 25,000 volunteers. We went from 1,000 meals a day to 150,000 meals a day. At the end of the mission, we almost did 4 million meals. If I tell you the truth, this was a Coliseum. In this place, we used to do 75,000 people a day. Huge army of people. This was the map we did. There you could see all the kitchens we had and all the different places that we were interested, like the bakeries. We needed the bakeries to be functioning. We would try to help them to get generators so they could produce bread. So we had bread to make sandwiches. We had information. You were talking about data. Data was very important. How we knew where people in need were? When the credit companies were sharing with us the data, where there is no credit company, credit cards being used, and snaps or the food stamps cards being used, Well, you know that or people are very poor because they don't have credit cards, or you know that they are very hungry because they are not able to cash the SNAP cards. Information and data was vital for us to know what communities across the island were in need of a plate of food. And we used technology and whatever else we could. Food trucks become our angels. We had more than 10 food trucks that they will go every day all across. But we didn't only use food trucks. We will be using the Navy, the National Guard. We will use in the military, the Army. At the end, we will use every single volunteer that had a car. Everybody became for us pure distribution. And this was teams and teams. We had 4 lanes a day in that one main kitchen. The number of sandwiches we were doing every day was unbelievable. Every day we kind of were beating a record. And it's very important to create this sense that you are one team. It's why we all like, especially here in the World Bank with so many people around the world, soccer, football so much. We all love to root for a flag. We all love to root for a shirt. Here we were all rooting for the same team. We were all one. We were people that we were trying to feed anybody that was hungry. Oh, I went quick, back. And then we didn't leave Puerto Rico. To this day, we were very happy to announce that we kept in Puerto Rico after the need went down, helping farmers. Puerto Rico imports 90% of their food. We are working hard to make sure that Puerto Rico one day will dream to don't have to export almost any fruit and vegetable. We're dreaming high. Even if we achieve only halfway the goal we are trying to reach, it'll be a success. So we invested in almost 40 farms because they were not able to get loans from the traditional banks, and those men and women were about to be leaving the island. We began giving them little grants from $5,000 to $20,000. We were able to keep 40 of them up and running, producing many acres of fruits and vegetables. We put $4 more million. In the next 2 years, we're going to reach 220 farmers of different types, from hydroponics to fruit trees to fishing co-ops, et cetera, et cetera. So you see, we went there for the emergency, but in the process, we learned what the people needed because they were telling us. In the process, because we connected with the community, we were able to keep helping the community, making sure that one day Puerto Rico will be food independent. And then Guatemala. When Guatemala happened, the teams, they went. Now they don't even wait. Where are you? I'm here already. With whom? With 4 more people. And what they do is only one mission. What we do, we feed the hungry. Because the mission is very clear, everybody is able to organize very quickly. What do? We don't plan, we don't meet. We arrive and we start feeding. Before we knew, we were cooking like 48 hours after the volcano exploded for the people around Escuintla and Antigua. And this is the map. We love maps. There we had almost 31 shelters, hospitals, or schools that we were feeding. We were, the first NGO really arrived, and for, I would say, a few weeks, the ones taking care of the military, the first responders from Guatemala, and many of the shelters and the people. And at the end, these maps for us, well, if they are through technology, only a wall, map on the wall that we put the stickers, for us it's clear that everybody's always in the same set mind. In Guatemala, I think we did close to 400,000 meals, and we are still there. How? We make sure that everywhere we go, the communities try to do an effort to change from charcoal to gas. Whatever tells you that after a tragedy it's not possible to achieve change, they're wrong. The best moment to impact communities is when you try probably to change into new ways when it seems the most impossible. We've been able always to be successful trying to change from charcoal to gas in the most precarious situations. It does work. Why? Because people want to dream of a better future, and sometimes gas is this better future. This was Indonesia. The team there moved so quickly, so amazing. We were able to do we were able to respond in Indonesia for the first earthquake, then the first tsunami, and then the second tsunami. So we were there for many, many months. And every time we go, we adapt. There we were doing close to 10,000, 15,000 meals a day in every one of the missions. Always using locals. We love to use locals, and they want to be included. Sometimes in these emergencies, you know what happens? That people come from the outside. And we seem never to ask the locals what do they need. Who needs help? Who needs food? We always bring locals because locals know best how to give them help we come too often with the mentality that we know better. And more often than not, we're wrong. Listening to the locals, how their help should be applied, is the most effective way to provide aid. And then we only feed, but we try to use other ways. We bring with us thousands of lamps that people can have light at night, but then they can charge their phones. In these situations, a phone is life or death, and a light is something, like, believe it or not, very helpful. We've been distributing thousands of lights all across America and around the world. And this is what we do. This was the last track. At the very beginning, I think this was in Palu. We didn't have gas because it was a mess. The tsunami created a mess. But this I'm showing you because this is the last track. On the first few days, we had to cook with wood, or we didn't have any other way. But few days after we began cooking with wood, we were able to install the first gas kitchens. If you want, you make it happen. We always want to make it happen, so we always try hard. And usually, any part of the world, you are always able to achieve change. I want you to hear to this video.
Hambre, yo no tenía con qué comer, no tenía que darle a mis hijos, y por eso salí. Muchos alimentos de los cuales damos, niños de 3 años no los conocían. Un ejemplo muy claro es el de la manzana. Había niños que tomaban la manzana y decían, ¿qué es esto? Y el más grandecito decía, es una manzana, una manzana. Al probarlo decían, ¡ay, qué deliciosa es la manzana! Todos los que hemos estado en Venezuela hemos vivido el tener hambre. Y realmente es un sentimiento que por lo menos yo no quiero que nadie sienta. Yo digo, ojalá que nadie pueda sentir ese sentimiento. Es tan horrible tener hambre y acostarse y no tener que comer. Y levantarse y no tener la esperanza de comer. Es terrible. Entonces aquí todos trabajamos con mucho amor y con mucho deseo de que esa comida llegue a las personas a las que necesitan. Eso es lo que nos hace un buen equipo.
So, this is Desiree. She's been one of our amazing leaders. We went to Colombia. We opened 2 kitchens, one in Cúcuta, one in Pamplona, near Pamplonita. If you are from there, you know it. They have the best blackberries in the world, and probably the best oranges I've ever eaten. And I'm from Spain, and we have good oranges. But this was another one. We saw that was a need between Cúcuta and Bucaramanga. Even the need goes beyond to help, especially women with children, walking hundreds of kilometers, looking for a better life. So we arrived there, and we tried to cover the needs of the different shelters, refugee camps, and people as they walk. We provide sandwiches, we provide soup, we provide food, we provide gas. We are an organization that we are not official, we are not supposed to be there, but we try to cover the blind spots. That's what we are doing there. We are trying to learn how can we help Venezuela further, but this will be a conversation for another day. And then it used to be ending this Mozambique. I just came back from Mozambique yesterday. I spent there a week with my team. The team has been there over almost 3 weeks, over 3 weeks. And we have 2 kitchens in Beira. And I was able to see the amazing work that World Food Program does. We went on a mission with them to deliver almost food for 2,500 people in the last remote village. They were providing food. And this is one of the camps. This camp is called Peacock. And I'm so proud what the work the team is doing. This is very close to our first kitchen. What do? We arrive. We don't have any possessions. We don't own the hard assets. We are all about software, not about hardware. If we bring hardware with us, guess what? It takes weeks to get there. If we arrive with ideas and the willingness to adapt, nothing can stop us. That's what we put into our teams. Adaptation is more important than a plan. If you plan too much, let me tell you what's going to happen. That something is going to go wrong. And then you are like, shit, the plan cannot work anymore. So plan. But if you don't include adaptation, you'll never be prepared enough. We prefer invest in adaptation than invest in planning. Because planning always shows us that doesn't matter what we plan, things don't go as we try to dream them. Because hurricanes, don't tell them, don't come this way, make a left. Or the tsunami, oh, please don't hit anybody. It doesn't work that way, so you need to adapt. Adaptation is more important than planning. You heard here. I believe in it. And this is the way we do the feeding, because as you know, it's cholera right now. So we bring this truck so nobody gets into the camp. We try to have the entire truck always very clean. The people go in and they don't leave it until they don't go back to the kitchen. And right now, yesterday we arrived to 20,000 meals a day. So I'm super happy of the work the team has been doing. We're over 200,000. Yeah, we're about to reach 250,000 meals and going. And this is used to show you that, yes, cholera happened, but because we felt like still the camps need some help, just we bring with every one of our deliveries the water. We began doing this only a few days ago, 2-3 days ago. But at the end, I'm not listening to anybody. We do plastic plates because I don't want people to be with garbage all around the camp. Garbage is one of the reasons then we have cholera sometimes. And then when you give the sense that they need to wash every day, those men and women are not stupid, especially the woman. If the best barrier against cholera on any family, you know who they are? Women. They only don't need much. If we are able to give them clean water, believe me, cholera doesn't happen. When cholera happens, it's not because they don't know best. It's because they don't have clean water or clean situations around them. In the moment you give them a little hope, a little glimpse of a support, things use. The problems disappear on their own. And that's at the end, more or less, the things we've been doing. Many of the more than 23 activations, more than 44,000 volunteers across the world, more than 10 million meals, many of them used in the last 2 years alone. And at the end of the day, that's what we do. We believe that if we give the tools to the people will feed themselves. And sometimes every solution to every big problem is not planning, is not meeting. In our case, because we are cooks, is just start cooking. And one plate of food at a time is the solution for a better world. Thank you very much.
Wow, I'm totally inspired. One plate of food at a time. There's so many quotable quotes there. But I think perhaps what's most important is the fact that just get started, right? Adaptation, adaptation, be ready, move in, do it. I'm really inspired. You know, Alison, let me start with you, having heard Jose speak. And IEG, in its own way, works quite uniquely, but on the front of research and information. When you hear him speak about work on the front line, getting into it, when he says adaptation above planning, which is interesting. But how do you work some of his wisdom into the work that IEG does and its relevance to all its partners?
Well, thanks for that, and thanks, Jose Andres. That was indeed truly inspiring. I mean, what I would say, I think, maybe we say it slightly differently, but in some ways we had some points that connected and overlapped. And I think one of those is about the role that evaluation can play. It needs data, it needs information for sure, but it also needs to be able to take into account that things change. That, you know, even with the very best objectives in mind and the very best intentions as we start out an intervention, it's really important that there is built in the capacity to change, and we as evaluators who will come in at a later point to find out, well, did it work? We need to be able to take that into account into what we do. Because you're right, you know, planning has a role, but it doesn't always work to plan. So one of the things I take away from Jose Andres' talk is, along with, it's really important we know where these groups are. We need to be better at understanding where to look and where the most vulnerable are likely to be, whether it's in a disaster or in any other setting. We also need to make sure that we have the methodologies to be able to take into account adaptation and change and course correction, and also to have an open conversation when things don't work, right, and learn from that. And I'd like to think that's something that we are committed to in IEG.
Thank you. So, you know, Chef Jose, I want to thank you for going into Mozambique so early. And you know, I would be fascinated, and I think a lot of people here would love to understand, how do you identify the situations you go into? And also, how do you identify when it's time to move out? Although now what I've learned is you don't really move out, you evolve, you know, you shift, you change, you evolve. But how do you identify these situations?
It's very funny because I have in front of me who they've been 2 of our 3 executive directors of World Central Kitchen. And before I answer you, I want to... So I mentioned before Nate Mook. Nate, who is the actual executive director. Can you stand up, please? Nate? Yep. Yeah, you can clap. But everything has a beginning, right? And the beginnings are never easy. And actually, the World Bank and World Central Kitchen, we are one, and you don't know it.
Wow.
Let me tell you why. Because the first person was my executive director, or I work for her, because was an amazing woman who worked at the World Bank. She took a sabbatical, and without her, many of the projects you saw in Haiti, they will never happen.
Wow.
She helped me really move the organization forward and allow us to do what we do today. I want you to help me give a big round of applause to a World Bank amazing talent woman. Fredes Montes, please stand up. Woo! Yeah, you are. Without her, it wouldn't happen. And I love you, Fredes, for it. And so we're in Washington. The question was great, but let me tell you what's really important to answer. No, that was a joke. My jokes are very bad. You know the politicians, they always answer whatever they want. You got the joke, finally. So hard, you people. We need more jokes at the World Bank, but good ones, I guess, yeah. So it's funny because we're still a very young organization.
Right.
Sometimes we go into the projects and we don't even have money in the bank to take care of them.
Wow.
But at the end, think about it, right? I think we are in this moment that when we believe we can be an agent of change, we like to show up. In the fires in California, there we were. In the volcano in Hawaii, we show up. In every single hurricane in the States lately, we are always there. And we are usually the first and the ones that reach the most. And we are not official. And sometimes some people not too happy that we show up.
Oh.
And I'm okay with it, because you know who is happy? The people that are hungry.
Right, right.
And at the end is who we serve for. So we believe that we're going to keep growing.
Right.
As you see, 10 million for a small NGO is a very big number. Fascinating to see the numbers we are able to reach. But we believe that we need to get ready, because the world is going to need, unfortunately, more of us if we don't do something to change the many things. Last year, if you remember, or was 2 years ago exactly, in one moment we had more than 10 hurricanes or cyclones in formation or forming or already active all across the Ecuador. 10. Many of them didn't hit land, but many of them did. Right. So imagine if we don't need organizations like ours. We're small, we're quick, we're able to grow from 14, 16 people in home office to thousands in a matter of days. We're very flexible. That's the type of organizations we need to start investing on. We need more organizations that are more precise and specific to the issue that we need to fix. It's not possible that an organization that is supposed to be taking care of the health of individuals, that they are giving money to build homes, is going to be a failure. And we've seen it before. We are an organization of cooks. What do? We cook and we feed. We're going to need more NGOs like ours, almost like if we were startups, that they are going to be very precise, very specialized, and that they are able to be flexible and move quick and adapt.
Thank you.
We are the one that does food, but we need others that will cover the different things that we need in this type of emergency.
Thank you very much. So, Alison, I'll come to you on best approaches in a moment, but can I just say, you can submit your questions for Jose, Chefs Jose, and for Alison as well at www.paulev.com/. #IEG now. So do submit. And if you are discussing online, the hashtag is Invest in People. I love the fact, Alison, that, you know, we're talking about vulnerable and excluded populations, and often what happens is we end up looking at the developing world, right? But there's a recognition that this is happening everywhere in the world, and there are needy, hungry people everywhere. When it comes to best approaches, I think we've had some fascinating insights from Jose on that. What advice would you have for development organizations and governments as to what works best and what they can learn from experiences like this?
Thanks, Julia. I think that you're absolutely right. I think what we're talking about here is people who are actually across the globe. And you know, there's an enormous amount of learning, I think, to be pulled together about how to reach those populations and how to make a real impact in their lives. I think the kinds of things we see through IEG evaluations very much point to this need to be very intentional in the design and implementation of initiatives so that you know who you're trying to reach. This idea that you can simply leave it up to, you know, like I said, trickle down or trickle over is something we're learning that often doesn't work. So there's a real need to be intentional. That means gathering the right kind of data, the right kind of diagnostics, and then involving people, being able to involve communities and stakeholders in being the change that needs to happen. And there's some great experience across World Bank projects where that's been transformative. But we need to learn from those and see if we can replicate them. Jose, we were chatting before we came down here, he said he has this idea about multipliers, about how do we multiply. And we have a language in development around replication and scaling. But it's the same thing. How do you go from small, something that maybe affects a community, to something that connects a district or a province? And I think that's the challenge that we're all facing. But there are great building blocks for us to build on. We need to find them, and we need to amplify them.
So I love the word intentionality. I was speaking to some young people in Nairobi the other day, and I was speaking about parenting. And I said, you know, mother and child health care starts with intentionality around having children. And it's fascinating because their eyes lit up. It hadn't occurred to them. Decide, don't just go into it. And perhaps what we're saying is intentionality around misinformation is tragic. So we need the right information to drive us in the right direction. I come back to you, Jose, now, and I'm fascinated with the idea of training that works. So you do a lot of training. And the importance of that is, how do you connect the people who are then trained to opportunities? How do you ensure that it works for them for the long term?
Well,
so, yes.
Well, obviously, I show you the one school we have, for example, in Port-au-Prince, which we are very proud of. But let me give you a situation that will be considered emergency. What is happening right now in Colombia? All the caminantes, all the people from Venezuela leaving the country, we began bringing some of them to help us in the preparation of the thousands of meals we make every day. And some of them are cooks, but many of them are not. So in the process of helping us, they are learning how to grab a knife, how to cook, how to chop. But we even went further. For example, I want to praise the Colombian government because they help us bring in Colombian officials to train the many men and women that were helping us in the production of this food. And they got the sanitation class for properly handle the food. They gave them the ID after they took the class and they passed the exam. And in the process, they gave them even a temporary working card. To me, that was fascinating to see on behalf of the Colombian government that they will be so willing to partner with a little NGO like us, that again, we were not even there in an official capacity, and help them provide the aid to these people of Venezuela in a fast, clean, efficient, sustainable way, making them legal under any circumstance, and also giving them the tools to perform their work and their duty. I know many of these men and women, some of them probably one day they will end in the tourism and hospitality workforce.
Right.
And maybe some of them one day will come soon with us to Venezuela to try to feed as many children as we can in a short term. So that's the way I see it, that even in semi-emergencies like this, even this is an emergency, a humanitarian emergency in every sense, we're very happy that we are able to bring those quick, fast approaches and ideas, usually in partnership with local or, in this case, the government of Colombia.
Thank you. I'm going to come back to my questions in a moment, but we have so many questions coming in on the poll. I see them. Oh, my screen has just gone blank.
There are so many questions that the computer...
Yeah, it froze. It froze.
Oh, they are.
So there we go. Here we have one. Can you tell us the reasons? What has made you start this project? How do you influence other fellow celebrity chefs? Let me extend that to celebrities or influential persons to do the same thing.
The word celebrity chef is really such a bad word. It's the only profession in the world that somebody puts celebrity next to it. You know, I'm a cook. So listen, it's many, many scenarios. Many of you don't know, but I've been for many, many years, Hillary Clinton, Secretary Clinton named me the ambassador of the Alliance of Clean Cook Stoves. As you see, we've been talking a little bit about it. And I took this kind of honorary ambassadorship, whatever you call it, very seriously. And I've been speaking around the world on this issue. And then through our NGO, we try to really bring clean cooking as much as we can in every corner that we go to. But then, chefs like me, we know many people. As I told you, we're a big army. We're an army of millions of cooks. And what we're trying is to connect those millions of cooks, like in one moment we can all be activated to make sure that one day maybe we dream of no hunger. So the World Bank for me was very important, that was behind the Clean Cook Stove movement. And believe me, Dr. Kim, before he left, he has his ear full of me and clean cooking. I told Dr. Kim maybe it was one of the reasons he moved on, because he's like, Jose, stop talking to me about clean cooking. I give up. I give up. But let me tell you, I just was talking today with the people at the Alliance of Clean Cooking, and it's already few projects happening between the World Bank and the Alliance of Clean Cook Stoves, some of them in Haiti, some of them in Bangladesh, in India, and other parts of the world, and I'm so happy. So how me being a chef help? Well, I've been to Kenya with this issue, Cambodia. It's one chef in India called Sanjeev Kapoor. If you're Indian, you know him. If you don't know him, he's probably the chef with a TV show that the most people watch in the world. He's a celebrity beyond celebrities. He's a celebrity. He got into the bandwagon of supporting clean cooking. Now he's becoming the face of clean cooking, surrounded by a whole bunch of women chefs, that he's been empowering them to be the spokesperson. And many of the changes that you see right now that are going to be happening in India and Bangladesh, Sanjeev Kapoor is making it happen because he's every day on TV, on radio, on the communities, telling everybody that clean cooking is the way. So every one of us, here in this room, in the building, all around America and the world, we all have the power to bring others to our causes. Why? Because we need to. Because we cannot do it alone. So everyone has the responsibility to always be bringing one other person to everything you believe in. That's what I try to do with cooking and with fellow chefs.
Thank you, thank you. I mean, that's absolutely inspirational. Just for those who are not aware, this clean cook stoves issue is a massive issue. And in fact, in our space in East Africa, it is the biggest killer. It is claiming...
How many people cook in the world today with charcoal or wood?
No, how many?
Close to 3 billion people. 3 billion. You know how long ago we began cooking with 3 rocks and wood? If you say 250,000 years, it's okay. 250,000 years ago, maybe longer. I was not there. So 250,000 years later, since humanity controlled fire,
wow,
We have millions, hundreds of millions of women in the world, because believe me, boys like me don't feed the world.
Yeah.
If it wasn't for women, humanity wouldn't be fed.
Wow.
Yeah, but
Powerful.
I'm very proud of that. But I'm proud that if we give them the tools to feed humanity in the right way, if we invest in clean cooking, if your dream is to end poverty and hunger, you will never achieve the dream until we don't bring a clean cook stove to every single household in every single continent in the world.
Thank you.
You heard it here.
Thank you, thank you. I'm glad we've had a chance to highlight that issue. Alison, just before I go back to the questions coming in, I have another one for you. A lot of the examples and our focus this morning is human or social development related. Can you take us through some examples relating to creating economic opportunities for these vulnerable and often excluded populations? What has worked well?
Yes, I mean, I think there are a whole number of excellent examples, and in some ways that's where I think probably this institution has got better examples than many others, particularly at projects that have involved expanding access to financial services through a whole variety of different modalities, but also in connecting people with markets through infrastructure, small-scale infrastructure, large infrastructure, increasingly green infrastructure. So there are multiple examples, and I think that the point, though, is that, again, going back to what you have to be thinking about for whom and who is ultimately going to benefit. And that one evaluation I mentioned that looked at the bank group's work on the shared prosperity agenda, what was interesting about that is that even when poverty is the focus, it's not always the case that interventions map closely with where the poorest are. And this goes back to the point of being intentional, of understanding and knowing. And increasingly, we have such amazing data tools, both at the point where interventions are designed and at the point of evaluation to identify where poor groups are, that be it economic opportunity or social inclusion, we can do this better. And I think, in the area of finance, in access to markets, in infrastructure, we have lots of good examples where people have been able to be connected with opportunity and sustained opportunity, which, of course, is really important.
Right, thank you for that. Fascinating questions coming in. You've traveled around the world. What is your message to young people on how food and cultures can connect differences and discrimination? Can we still do that, and how? So your experience with food and culture and how it brings people together.
Wow, with so many questions, and you pick this one. Listen, I'm about to quote a guy from France, and believe me, a chef from Spain doesn't quote French people in the open. I mean, it's a culinary rivalry, you need to understand it. But this person in 1826, he died, I think, that year, 27. His name was Brillat Savarin. And Brillat Savarin is the guy that said, tell me what you eat, and I will tell you who you are. Did you hear this phrase? So it was a French guy, believe it or not. It's a very powerful thought.
Yeah.
Because really we are the mirror of what we eat, what we cook, our traditions, that then goes beyond that, right? This same person, he had even a more powerful phrase. He was more a philosopher than a cook. He said, the destiny of the nations will depend in how they feed themselves. So as you see, powerful guy putting food. But nothing I saw the importance of those two phrases, as I was one day cooking in Haiti, with whatever I got, was my 4th day after I arrived in Haiti, my first time. And I was cooking those beans, and I made this huge bean stew for around 250 people in this one camp. All the women came to me 4 hours later with the help of a translator. And the translator told me, Jose, they're very honored of how much hard work you're putting trying to feed them, but they don't like what you're cooking. And I'm like, what's going on? Well, you're making these black beans, but they don't eat them like you are. They don't eat them whole. They love to make a puree. And they love to pass them through a strainer, and they are very smooth. And then they love to put that like a sauce on top of the rice. Do you have a problem doing this? Like, sure. How are we going to do this? We don't have materials. No matter what, somehow they began getting balls and rocks, and they began smashing the beans. They were hungry, but 4 hours later, we were still smashing the beans. And then we got USAID's rice sacks, and they began passing it through the rice sacks.
Wow.
Another 2 hours. They were singing. At the end, the sauce was perfect.
Wow.
And they were eating, and they were happy. It's what I said before, right? That sometimes we come from the outside, and we don't listen, and we try to think what they want, think what they need. For me, this probably was one of the best MBA on-the-ground experiences I ever received in my life. Wow. And from now on, I always apply the same. What do you need? What do you want? How can I help you? Wow. And when you hear what they have to tell you, believe it or not, what you give them is much more productive than if you give them what you think they need.
Wow, that is so powerful. And what I captured there is the importance of dignity and respect. Right? So important. I love this question. How do you access inputs, local produce needed to cook in disaster-affected areas? And I think this is an important one because you really want to give value to the local input and not compete with that local input.
Listen,
right?
This has been the question that many people have been having, right? That we go, when we went to Haiti, Puerto Rico, and everybody is like, Jose, how did you got food? How did you, because if you heard the news, it was like total disaster, right? And you know the answer is, well, we got food because chefs always know where food is. And this thing that you have to bring everything from the outside is always food around.
Wait. So do you sniff it out? I mean, how do you
Close.
find
Close.
it? Yeah.
At the end, you know what we did in Puerto Rico? We knew who was the biggest distributor of food. We went to the private sector. I got a meeting of the 20 biggest private sector owners of the island. We met together in the back of the lobby of the hotel. They told me, Jose, it's not going to be a problem with food. I gave them my credit card. We opened a line of credit, and we never had a problem with food in Puerto Rico from day one.
Wow.
No, well, what I mean sometimes is, seems the problems are super big, and what happens is that the people that come to help from the outside, they don't know what's going on in the area they're trying to help. And they're trying to bring the food from overseas.
Yes.
When sometimes you have plenty of food locally, believe it or not. Obviously, after certain emergencies, it's not easy. But even, for example, in Indonesia or now coming back from Mozambique, teams always have access to food locally in the places we try to help. What we need to do is partner with the locals, that they're going to tell us what's going on. Right. If we come without locals, we are blind. And if we are blind, we can never provide help to the people we are trying to help.
Thank you. Alison, this is such an important point because looking at the development world for decades, for instance, in the Horn of Africa, we have another drought. And a lot of food for a long time was coming in and we weren't building local capacity. So this issue of really sourcing local input, local knowledge is critical.
No, absolutely. And I think many of the valuations we do very much zero in on the extent to which local capacity is being identified, but also invested in for the future. And of course, there's many levels at which that needs to happen. I noticed a few of the questions here point to what's the role for institutions? Where's the public sector in these scenarios? And I think just going back to the one example I gave around connecting electricity, making connections to female-headed households. I mean, the point about that story is that it was actually a really committed government with a very motivated national utility that actually created the momentum for that to happen. So I think everything you've described shouldn't be happening in a vacuum of public responsibility. But it's actually about building that partnership and building that the strengths of communities to be able to sustain for the future.
There was a fascinating question, I can't see it, if we could scroll through, that really spoke about how to ensure that you are using, here we go. What role does environmental sustainability, example, zero waste, carbon neutrality, play in your work in the restaurant industry? Yeah.
All right. I think that was my wife who sent me that question. Listen.
Can you just wave at everybody?
You know one thing? With this question, what role does environmental sustainability, zero waste, carbon neutrality play in your work in the restaurant industry?
Yeah.
If you think about it, the restaurant industry, we are a very big population. In America alone, in the food business, we are more than 10 to 14% of the workforce, between cooks and farmers, and the food movement is a very big one. Any action the food movement takes has a ripple effect for the better or for the worse in everything we are talking continuously from. So restaurants right now, we feel the pressure in more ways than one. Because guess one thing, it's two things that we do. Only two things from the moment we're born to the moment we go to a better life, which is breathing and eating. That's why the cooks like me, we are at the forefront of many of the problems and trying to find them solutions. And I believe so. Restaurants, somehow, they are the place that we can be putting all of this at play. I don't know if you remember the photo not too long ago, maybe a couple of years ago, of that turtle that had a plastic straw all up through her nose. Oh. I remember in my restaurants that we took the decision to try to move away from plastic straws here in DC. And many of you, probably in the World Bank, they were bitching non-stop of why we didn't give plastic straws. Why? Because we are very comfortable with our plastic straws. Guess what? That photo in the newspapers and web pages around the world of that one turtle suffering as somebody was trying to pull out the plastic straw was the one that got the entire industry changing. Right. If you go now to restaurants, you will see how everybody slowly is moving away. We can bitch about the paper straws we don't like, but now we are in a moment of no return. It's very funny how many of those things that we don't think, like has to do with the environment, to protecting animals, to the restaurant somehow, we like it or not, we are at the forefront. So I know that my profession, if anything, is ready to take on all those challenges, because we know that every time the restaurant industry makes a change, can have a huge effect, not in DC, but I'm talking all around the world. Why? Because everybody has to eat. And if we are all trying to move forward, eating better, more logical, and trying to live the way we preach and the way we clap, we know that change is just around the corner.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm coming to the final question in a short while, but I just wanted Alison to tap into a very interesting statement made by Chef Jose earlier when he said that, you know, times of tragedy actually are the greatest times to maybe institute change. It may seem totally impossible, but that may be the environment where people are more hopeful, you know, dreaming of what could be possible. Is this something that could be input into the work that you do, is analyzing how do we then work in times of greatest challenge to shift into change?
I think it's a really interesting point, and I would suggest that the evidence is probably pretty strong behind that point. In fact, here in the World Bank Group, there's an example which I think we've looked at through some of our work in IEG around the Ebola response. And you know, that really did galvanize an extraordinary level of speed and collaboration across the World Bank at a time, obviously, where a response was needed very quickly. And those moments where sometimes the silos within organizations can get in the way of working well, when there is something like, in this case, a serious health crisis, it has the ability to transcend those silos and for collaboration to come forth. And it's reassuring that that's possible. But the question is, why can't we replicate that more consistently? But I think that's a great example of where a crisis then can generate a much more coordinated and collaborative response.
Right, right. Thank you for that. So I'm going to take this one because I've seen this mentioned a couple of times. People are referring to the fact that when we move to gas stoves, I will refer to this, that there's no repellent for the malaria situation. So in some way, I think there's belief out there that the charcoal that's used to cook deals with the malaria problem. However, if you are getting smoke inhalation and dying of smoke inhalation, I would imagine that's still a problem. Chef, am I correct in saying that basil and other herbs grown in some of these areas could be the answer to the problem?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a cook. I'm not a health expert. But what I heard this thing, obviously, malaria is malaria, and cooking with charcoal is cooking with charcoal. We need to address malaria itself in the way we need to make sure that we can claim malaria-free one day in the entire planet. Right. But one doesn't go in this sense with the other, right? It's plenty of places that they cook with charcoal that they have malaria. So that's a big belief that, quite frankly, is not something I will agree with. Or to say that we're going to be fighting malaria just with burning charcoal or wood all over will be the way forward. So for me, I think we need to tackle malaria as one, and we need to tackle clean cooking as the other. And then we will be in a better place.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And just to clarify, I know that in Kenya, I was recently with a Rotary in Nairobi, where they're getting basil, rosemary, and all these different herbs, and they're growing these in communities to deal with that situation in a natural way. And please, let's not tell vulnerable populations that they have to choose between dying of smoke inhalation or malaria. It's just wrong. So I come now to our final question. And before I ask this, let me just share an African proverb. An ant on its feet can do more than an elephant lying down. We all have a role to play, no matter how big or small we think that we are. And so this final question captures this perfectly for us, I think. What advice do you have to give to someone who wants to start their own startup to feed the less privileged, wherever they might be? They might be small at community level, they might be big, whoever they might be. What advice would you give them?
Well, the advice I will give to any young person that wants to get into the feeding business is a great news, people. By the year 2050, we're 9 billion people. And guess what? We all have to eat. So there is only bad opportunity. Anybody that can do it in a conscious social business way, especially in the poorest part of the world, they are in the right business. We need to find ways to be helping them. I would love, as many friends as I had over the last 25 years I've been in DC from the World Bank. You guys, all my friends, everybody always tells me about how big are and how impactful they are, the projects that you work on. But sometimes they are so big that it takes forever to see the light that the project is finished. And sometimes years pass by and it's good what you're doing, but the impact is going to be seen only many years down the road. Startups, I do believe, is the way forward to change many of the problems we face in the world. It would be great to see the World Bank moving more and more, slightly, a bigger percentage maybe than what is now, into supporting more startups around the world, where you can see action and reaction immediately, where a little investment you see that can help improve the lives of small communities all around the globe. Something like you come, and as you come back from your mission around the world, you scream into this atrium, "We succeeded! We did it!" every single day. I think small programs are very helpful because it's when you are able to fail quickly and learn from the failure, but then succeed quickly, and then share that success, gives everybody hope for keep working harder, even in the bigger projects that we know you are working so hard every day. So startups are important for the world. More NGOs, they need to behave like startups, but we need more private business, specifically in terms of feeding, how we do it quicker, smarter, creating jobs, solving many of the problems that we face. Feeding humanity shouldn't be creating problems. Feeding humanity should be solving the problems. And I think you guys in this building, in this room, you are at the forefront of making that happen. Let's try to give more dollars to those smaller startups that can achieve quicker, faster success. And we can see it and enjoy it year to year.
Wow, very powerful. Thank you, Alison. Thank you for that. I come to you on the same issue, but for those people who might be smaller, don't have a lot of capacity to get access to information, to research, to data, have nowhere to start because what Chef Jose is doing is using a lot of data that they have. But for these other people who have goodwill and want to get started, what would your words of advice be?
I think what I'm hearing from José Andrés is a couple of things. But first thing I'd just like to say, I think we're probably an organization that struggles to talk about failure. And I think we've got to make it more acceptable to have open and honest conversations. I mean, failure is a big word, but let's at least have that level of candor and that willingness to engage around things that maybe didn't work to plan, but we can learn from and build on. And I think we in IG have a responsibility for that, and so does the rest of the World Bank. On the point about local capacities, and I think the World Bank Group can do an even better job at being a spotter of talent, a spotter of opportunity, of using its leverage, its convening power in creative ways to put its muscle behind that, to lean in and support those kinds of initiatives. It doesn't have to do the job itself the whole time. It's also about spotting what's out there and backing on success.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I'm going to ask each of you for a parting shot. I mean, there have been so many quotable quotes in this session. It's amazing. But for me, I think what has touched me the most is that charity should be about the liberation of the receiver and not the redemption of the giver. And if each of us walk away with that in mind, everything we do, every single intervention, we must ask ourselves, is it about the liberation of the receiver? Otherwise, I'm feeding my own ego. That's what I'm doing. For each of you, and I'll start with you, Alison, what's your parting shot as we look at how to create opportunity for the vulnerable and the often excluded?
Well, I just want to say, I think it's all about impact, people. We've got to be focused on that. And being sure that people have a seat at the table is step one. Amplifying their voice and their agency at the table is where we need to be.
Thank you, thank you. Chef, you have the final word.
Guys, super happy really to be sharing these thoughts with all of you. The message is very simple. I think what Central Kitchen has shown us that when we all come together with one very clear objective, everybody understands the message. I think we all need to try to be simplifying what our goals are. In our case, feeding the hungry. Everybody understands that message. And then everybody joins that effort in very simple ways. In our case, in emergencies, and don't take it that literally, but we don't really plan and we don't really meet. We start cooking. In the process of doing, the real plans show up. And then the real path to help people shows up. Sometimes being for days or weeks in a room, planning the perfect plan, never achieve much success. Because guess what? It's never the perfect plan. But any plan that you believe in will be the one that you should support. Stop planning so much and start doing more right now. That's what we do at World Central Kitchen. We are far away from perfect. But guess what? In our imperfections, we keep feeding the people that are hungry every time we show up somewhere.
Wow, a round of applause. Simplify, simplify. Stop planning so much. Start doing more. Thank you very, very much to Alison and Chef Jose. I'm on a journey of learning how to cook, so I hope to do better, and I feel totally inspired. Do we feel inspired?
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Thank you.